And for more on Pfizer's full FDA vaccine approval, I'd like to bring in emergency medical physician and ABC News medical contributor, Dr. Darian Sutton, who's been with me here on set, also listening to this interview. First reaction.
I thought that was really helpful. There were a lot of questions that were asked that me and other physicians have that I'm grateful that you asked here, because we really want those answers. We want to know, what is the timeline, what is the data, and what are our next steps? And I feel really hopeful about this information.
It's Terry. In a poll from the Kaiser Family Foundation in June, they found that about a third, 31% of unvaccinated people say they would be more likely to get the vaccine if it received full approval from the FDA. 68% said this wouldn't make them more likely to get a shot. And I've got a couple of questions. First, why should people trust this approval? What do you say to those for whom this isn't good enough? And second, do you think this approval is enough really to persuade more people? In your practice, did you hear that a lot? People like, I'm going to take a pause until we get full approval.
You know, I've gotten both ends when I'm talking to patients in the emergency room and talking to people out in the community. There are specific groups of people who simply want that full approval. And like I said, this full approval helps to solidify something that we're already seeing, which are that these vaccines are safe and effective. And if a full approval helps push that person from deliberation to actual decision making and getting a vaccine, I'm all for it. As for those reports of approximately 30%, I want to be optimistic and hope that it is as high as that, but I have to be realistic and say that in my personal experience, I have not seen that percentage of patients who are waiting for that full approval label. But again, any bit helps in this situation.
Anything that concerns you? Anything you think did you not get an answer you were looking for?
You know, I come from the perspective of a science background, and so I understand that this takes time and effort. And for me, I just want to make sure that we continue to put out the data, which is that these vaccines are proving effective. And sometimes it can be confusing when we see these effective rates or effectiveness rates kind of change throughout time. But I want to reinforce that we expect to see that change, especially during an ongoing pandemic with more transmissible variants. And the goal that I hope people get today is that getting vaccinated not only protects you, but protects the community, decreases the risk of us having new variants develop, and gets us to our new normal sooner than later.
And doctor, so how much do you think of an impact this full approval will actually make in general, not just with this, but in general, the sense that people are learning about the process, how we go through it together, how scientists go through it. Do you think it'll make a difference in fighting vaccine hesitancy for this and others?
Absolutely. And I always say, as the president had said earlier today, this is not just a pandemic against COVID-19. It's a pandemic against misinformation and the unvaccinated. And unfortunately, that misinformation has a tremendous amount of endurance. And as science communicators and physicians and healthcare providers, we try our best to get up every single day and preach about the information that we have gotten and the safety around this vaccine. So I'm really hopeful that people can take with this and feel more confident in their decision, especially those who have gotten vaccinated before and may feel a little bit remorseful or guilty or suspicious when they see this misinformation and have that buyer's guilt that some people can have. And I speak to patients about it all the time. But for me, it helps me have some solid background where I can say, this is the data. We have gotten tremendous amount of information. And honestly, there's been more data and study around this vaccine than there has about any treatment that we have available. And so I try to reinforce that. It's effective and safe.
You know, doctor, most of us have friends or relatives who don't want to get the vaccine, and they got various reasons. What do you hear most as a source of misinformation that really frustrates you?
Well, Terry, I have to say I have family members who I'm still talking about getting the vaccine, and people would imagine that although I'm a physician and I'm sitting here communicating science, that it would be as simple as just telling my family members to get the shot. But I realize that those who have not gotten vaccinated, that group of people, they're not monolithic. They have many different reasons for why they chose to not get vaccinated. I have some patients that are truly concerned about their fear of needles, other patients that have real past and present trauma with the medical institution, and other patients who just simply deny that COVID-19 and this pandemic exists. And I have to say I've met each and every one of them in the emergency room as patients. And so I try my best to reinforce what we know, give confidence about that, and also be honest about what we don't know and compare the risk. When we're looking at risk mitigation, when we're looking at risk and understanding that when we're making a decision, sometimes you can get lost in the data. But really what we have to understand is that COVID-19 poses a much greater risk than any of these possible rare adverse effects that we have seen with the vaccine. And these vaccines, again, are proving tremendously effective in keeping people out of the hospital.
You know, it's interesting you're talking about your patients being hesitant. So Pfizer is renaming the Pfizer vaccine Comirnaty. And all of us have been, what does that mean? How'd they put that together? And it's a combination of various COVID terms. But I asked you what you thought about that, and your answer was interesting, that people just don't like to hear the word vaccine.
We have to step away from, sometimes we have to step away from that trigger word. And you know, it provides a tremendous amount of bias. And when I talk to patients who come in who are unvaccinated, symptomatic, ill, and needing treatment, sometimes I'll ask them, you know, this medication, I'll reference, for example, Regeneron, is still under emergency use authorization and has limited data, but would you like it? And I have to say, every single time it is offered, it is taken. And that shows me that it's really, really illuminating, because it shows me that there is tremendous bias simply around the word vaccine, and that people can understand their risk, but they just have to be centered in the problem.
Well, that'll be interesting now with a different name and full FDA approval. It'll be interesting to follow the data now to see what happens.
I hope it makes a difference.
Dr. Darian Sutton, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.